Good evening and welcome to Nox Mente. Tonight's guest is author Peter Moon. Born and raised in California, Peter Moon is primarily known for his investigation of space-time projects. These concern projects in the past, present, and future that control both time and the perception of time. An avid reader as a young man, he studied creative writing and literature and was particularly interested in both scientific extrapolations of science fiction as well as the high adventure that it provided. Peter went out on his own in 1983 and moved to Long Island, where his unique background enabled him to forge an association with scientist Preston Nichols, one of the world's foremost experts in the world of electromagnetic phenomena, who had been involved in strange experiments at the Montauk Air Force Station on Long Island, which included the manipulation of time. Their collaboration in writing, the Montauk Project, Experiments in Time, and its subsequent sequels have now reached legendary proportions. Peter Moon, welcome to the show.
Welcome, Peter.
Thank you. It's nice to be with you.
I consider you kind of an icon. I don't know why. I mean, I feel like you've done such remarkable work in the world and have been tied to such remarkable people that it's a true honor. Thank you for coming on.
Yes, thank you very much.
I have a comment about that. I have began to feel this icon status, particularly as Preston Nichols passed away. And, you know, there's everything that he did is now a memory.
Yes.
And what it is I move into the senior years, it's like everything that's been done in the past, it's like you know, it's sort of like you become the painting on the wall. This is what you can feel yourself. I can feel myself becoming the painting on the wall. And it's almost, you know, it's like having lived a life. So it's kind of creepy in that respect. You know what I'm saying?
I totally get that. I used to call it's someone else's life now because it's so far in the past, or it's like a whole other life of someone else that you lived. It's like a past life.
Well, exactly. So everything that happens now is new, and it's just part of what goes on in reality. And this applies to anybody's life, whether they don't have to have a public notoriety in their life. It's just like you become, you fade away and life goes by. That's what time is.
Yes.
Yeah, totally.
How do you, so with all that, especially with all your work with time travel and all of that, time equals distance and all that, how does that make you feel in this kind of the nowness, like on an emotional level? And if that's too personal, I apologize.
No, on an emotional level, it doesn't bother me. It's like, man, when you pass into the next zone, I don't have any fears of that. But it's like when you're living, you're holding up an act.
Yes.
It's just like, I like say in the early days of the Montauk investigation, I remember there was the psychotronics group, and I'd have one guy. There was one guy who was a doctor, and he was always like sort of a doubting Thomas in certain respects about Preston. And we were at I was with him at a conference or a lecture in New York City, and some girl was asking about the Philadelphia experiment and whatnot, and he chipped right in. He started telling the whole story as if he was an enthusiastic fan. In other words, he was like keeping up the front, so to speak. And that's sort of what what happens is people put up an artifice.
Yes.
Or there's sort of an illusion of what happens, what might happen, what did happen. But as far as like the artifice that I'm dealing with now is I published a rather fantastic book called Transylvania Moonrise, the first chapter of which talks about an alchemical tradition, whereas youth can be maintained for thousands of years, literally.
Yeah. Yes.
And it's presented very cogently and coherently. And I was told that I would meet this gentleman. I haven't met him, but then again, I wasn't prepared to meet him either. So I've been dangled with the promise of physical immortality.
I have I have, this was something I specifically wanted to get into tonight, and I'd written notes down about that, which we'll move into later, but that is something deep, near and dear to my heart. And I just want to say for everyone out there, because on Zoom I can see, Peter, you look remarkably youthful, I might add. I don't know what you're doing.
66. I'm 66. I practice Qigong every day.
Yeah, there's something, you're doing something wrong.
And I still play touch football at age 6.
Why don't you, oh, dang, that's full contact.
Yeah, well, it's not full contact. That's when you tackle, but we don't tackle. We touch it, and we beat some 25-year-old guys the other day from St. John's Law School. We beat them every year. We're 19-0.
Oh, that's excellent. Excellent. So let's just start in here with some of your...
if we don't, we're going to go balls deep into Montauk. So
right away, I know. And Jerry and I are both itching to, in new ways. So let's start with your background, a little bit of background. And I'm talking about the earliest stuff you can recall that influenced you, and from anything like, of course, dreams and your dream life and your imagination, to your relationship with nature or not, to pop culture stuff, like stuff that may have been on the TV, stuff that sticks out as far back as you can recall.
Well, I can say that with Preston Nichols, we both had the same favorite TV show when we were young, was The Time Tunnel. The Time Tunnel, however, I had to watch it more in the summer reruns because it was always on Friday, and I was usually at the movies on Friday night. But The Time Tunnel was by far the most fascinating show to me. That didn't really inspire me. It was just something I found very interesting. What inspired me to move in the direction I have was moving high schools when I was in 15 years old. And I went to Davis, California, where I was really displaced, having been disconnected from all my friends and all the sports I was involved in. So I really couldn't do anything but read. And I remember seeing some of the kids had the illustrated man by Ray Bradbury, and I couldn't wait to get my hands on that book because they said how good it was. And I read that, and that inspired me. It was a story, in particular, The Kaleidoscope, the second story in the book, which was kind of like about immortality. Somebody who was dying, an astronaut in space, and all he saw were these beautiful colors, and he got really high on the beautiful colors in outer space, and it was like immortality. And later on, I was able to meet Ray Bradbury at the Library of Congress, and gave a lecture. And the first thing he talked about, this is an interesting story about Ray Bradbury. He begins the story about immortality. He said there was a man at a carnival. He was called Mr. Electrode, or Mr. Electro, and he would do all these electronic stunts. Now, this was like in the, probably 1930 or so. And he took his sword, which was, I guess, electronically charged, and he put it on Ray Bradbury's forehead, and he says, "Live forever." And Ray Bradbury says, "So I will. I did." Of course, Ray Bradbury has passed away, but it was like the theme he talked about was immortality, and that wasn't my
forte.
But it was like that, an inspiration of reading science fiction. So I began to read the science fiction authors, Arthur C. Clarke, Robert Heinlein to a certain extent, and Robert Sheckley was another one. And I became a fan of science fiction.
Fan of Dune, Herbert?
I did read Dune. I was that was required reading in my science fiction class in high school. I took science fiction in high school.
Good teacher.
Yeah, and I read that, and yeah, I know about Dune. I have. I'm going to watch the final. What is it? The uncut version.
Oh yeah,
the recut version. Yeah,
the uncut version. It's the original version that was before it was cut into what it became.
But yes, but they added narration because Lynch was relying too much on the actors emoting their, what's going on. So in the second version, which was uncut, longer, etc., the director's cut, if you will, they had a lot of voiceovers for the, what people were thinking at the time. If you watch it again, it's pretty obvious.
You're more of a Dune expert than I am.
Just a fan. I do have a question about Ray Bradbury, though, which this is a bizarre one. Have you ever heard a rumor about what he used to call milk duds?
No, what did he call them?
Cunts.
Why?
I don't know. It was just a thing I read about him once.
I don't know. I know I hadn't heard that one.
That's strange.
When he was kids, he used to call them cunts. Okay. Anyway.
So strange. Well, I find that it's an interesting synchro with the Bradbury material, though, because you did later, obviously, the time travel stuff became a theme.
Well, yeah. Well, the time travel. Yeah, I mean, I didn't expect to meet Preston Nichols and hear all these wild and woolly stories. But because you said we were going to talk about dreams, there's a couple of, if you want me to go in that direction of dreams, I'm happy to.
Oh, yeah. I still want to get the early stuff pinned down just so that we have a little more foundation. So when you were a child, did you have a relationship with nature?
Oh, the only relationship I had with nature was probably significant. I mean, other than going to Yosemite, which was beautiful, was fishing in Southern California ocean.
Ooh, I love that.
Yeah, off the coast of Catalina, off of Catalina Island and whatnot. So my father took me fishing. He took me to the beach. He taught me to surf, and the water, the ocean, was definitely a factor. But when I was in high school, and I began to study, we studied. There was a lot of politics going on, and it became for some reason, I started reading about witchcraft. And when I read about witchcraft, what I noticed, all the literature in the high school library that mentioned witchcraft, because you could go into the Reader's Guide, it was all so prejudiced. I never saw such prejudice, as if they were, practically saying that Black people had slanted foreheads, which they used to say that in Alabama. They do physiological studies and say Black people didn't have as big of brains as white people. It was that bad or worse when they mentioned the subject of witchcraft. They had no, they were just like trying to shoot it in the foot. And I said, why is this? Why is this? There's this extreme prejudice. So I read a book by Sybil Leek.
Yeah, yes.
He mentioned Aleister Crowley. That was the first time I heard of Aleister Crowley. And I said, wow, there's something to this, the supernatural that is, not being acknowledged and is being reacted to. So I realized, and I began to study Taoism. And when I studied Taoism, I said, man, I am so far from nature, it's not funny. I felt like divorced from nature. And of course, that's the direction I wanted to go in. But it was like, this is like, the difference between being a homeless beggar and being the richest capitalist in the world. That's what I felt like, as far as nature. I felt so divorced from nature because, we were raised on ding dongs and ho-hos in my age, and all this assorted candy and stuff, and it just wasn't natural.
Were you sad when Hostess went out of business?
No. No, not at all.
Poison.
I know about the Twinkie defense, in San Francisco, the guy who shot Harvey Milk.
Yeah.
The Twinkies made him, mentally unstable.
Yeah, there's so much nastiness and all that stuff. Okay, so back in the early period, did you? So as far as dream content and all that, did you have? And so every question I have is definitely going to tie into dreams and that, all that, even stuff that relates to what you've done later on in your life. So did you have any fears where, like the typical stuff, the closed closet door, dark light, stuff under the bed, the dark wood? any of that stuff as a child?
I dreamt it's a very funny. I would dream. I wouldn't really have a dream. I'd wake up and see a tiger's face on the wall. It scared the hell out of me. And I would scream, and my father and mother would come in and console me. Uh, you know, just a tiger's face. Now it's funny. The tiger was also my favorite animal. I thought it was the most beautiful animal, but somehow it would come and scare me in the night.
Oh, that's very interesting. What about, and so back at this point, were you raised religious at all?
No, my father was an altar boy, and he rejected the priests. He knew what they were up to. He never talked about exactly what they did, but after he died, I found out that a psychic one time told me that he was betrayed by the cloth, and he could never forgive them. And then I found out later his brother, my uncle, had the same issue. He'd tell my grandmother that the priests are molesting me, and she'd say, no, a priest wouldn't do that.
Oh wow.
So he had it with the Catholic Church. He didn't fall prey to them, and he thought they were full of bull. My mother was raised as a Catholic, and she went along with my father. She was not passionate. She knew all the rigmarole and she taught me a little bit about catechism. She even took me to church when I was 4 at my own request. But that was driven by the fact that they had donuts at the church. So, and then she never took me after I brought a Donald Duck book when I was 4. They're all doing Latin, and I wanted to read my Donald Duck book, and she said, "No, I'm not taking you anymore."
Donuts and Donald Duck.
yeah. So that was the end of church as a young person. So it was Catholic church, but I was never baptized, and I was never indoctrinated. And some of my friends from grade school remember when I talked to them later in life, they remembered me being very opinionated about Christianity and not in a positive direction.
So what about some esoteric ideas about the Catholic Church as far as the baptism ritual, for instance, being some kind of ward, if you will, against like blocking your third eye? That's why they put the oil right there on your forehead. You ever heard anything like that or researched anything like that?
No, I mean, I don't know. I don't know how much damage that can do to an individual. Putting a little oil, they call it the chrism, might even open up the third eye.
It may.
That's what I was thinking.
But that's probably what it's from. But I'm saying is, you get so much religious indoctrination, and Catholics are. I mean, I grew up with Catholics, which a lot of my friends did not. I could cross-pollinate from group to group because I was like one of them, although I wasn't.
I was raised Roman Catholic, so.
Okay, but the thing is that Catholics aren't too judgmental. They don't like Jews. I mean, there was a lot of anti-Semitic comments and stuff. The only 2 friends I had initially in kindergarten were Jewish kids. They would because they were the only ones that would kind of talk. They were also the most intelligent. A lot of the kids kind of very non-communicative. But the Catholics they don't try to convince you to join their religion. That's something that
that's a good thing.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, and they don't really know too much about their religion. They don't really care too much about it. It's good for. I mean, they might believe in it. But I'm saying they don't get fanatical about it, and they use it for their baptisms, their christenings, their marriages, and their funerals. The service.
I've always really enjoyed I wasn't raised anything myself, and I've always really enjoyed Catholic people. They've been some of the wildest people I've known. Okay, and then just back with the early stuff. Do you remember being a child that had dreams often, or any of that kind of stuff going on? Not that it's specific dreams, but were you a dreaming child?
I wasn't, of course I had dreams, but I remember I think it was the third grade, uh, telling my friends in their third grade, my schoolmates, that I said, oh man, I had this dream. I was dreaming of a cartoon and it was in Technicolor. And they all called me a liar because everybody dreamt in black and white. And the reason they dreamt in black and white is because that's almost everybody had a black and white television. You know, this is 1961. And,
Yes.
and those who had color TVs, they didn't work too well. So, you know, so they thought I was lying because I dreamt in color. Well, I remember dreaming of a cartoon. It was kind of neat. But yeah, I would have dreams, and I don't necessarily remember them all at that early age. But I do. I was a dreamer. Yes.
I find that actually very significant nowadays because I ask, it's the standard thing I ask is the dream landscape, you know, do you dream in color, black and white? And so many people are unaware that black and white was kind of a standard. It changed a lot when we started to have color TV become common for people. And there's a connection there, I find, with the programming.
The people are black and white indoctrinated.
Well, that before color TV was really a thing, that black and white dreams were actually common.
I think they were because that was the visual you were fed if you were a TV watcher, which most everybody was.
Yeah, and so I find that significant, and I'm glad that you've brought that here. I love that you dreamed of a cartoon and that it was Technicolor, though. Do you remember the cartoon at all? Was it something that you had been seeing, or was it like your own constructed cartoon from
It
your
was
unconscious?
probably something along the lines of Mighty Mouse, which you know was on every Saturday morning. It was something.
Yeah.
I saw Mighty Mouse in black and white. It was something of that ilk.
Yeah, that's awesome. That is awesome.
Here I come to save.
Yes.
I was just thinking of Andy Kaufman doing that. It was great. I'm old too.
All right. So, and then also just kind of some basic stuff. You might laugh at this, but do you know any of your astrological signatures, like your sun and rising?
Oh yes, yes. I can start talking about astrology, and you know, astrologers will sometimes say, "What's that? I never heard of that." Because the reason for that is I've had a lot of close friends that were astrologers, and they would teach me things. I'm not an astrologer. I can, you know, look at a chart and give you the most general aspects of it. But yeah, I'm a Capricorn with Virgo rising.
Yeah, that rising is very important. I assume this is tropical Western tradition.
Yes.
Virgo rising. Interesting. Okay, cool. So on that note, let's look at the dream, and this is going to be interesting, I think, because of the span of your life. So if things have changed, just add that as a sub note. How does the architecture of the dreamscape appear to you, and if it has changed over your life, what have been some of those changes? So I'm guessing from the black and white color thing, but I'm looking for, you know, anything like sensate stuff as well, Peter. Like, do you experience taste and sound and all that stuff as well in the dreamscape?
I mean, I've gone through periods where I've had, you know, prognosticative or prognosis dreams where you kind of tap into the future. You tap into some occurrence. You tap into the future.
Yeah.
And I've also done dream work where I, you know, become aware in the dream, lucid dreaming.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't concentrated so much on smells or whatnot. And more recently, I've been very interested in my dreams about David Anderson. Like when I'd rather dream about David Anderson than have a lucid dream. because it's when I connect with him in the dream state, it's like very magical. And, you know, there was one dream where it was a whole, you know, where he ended up in my office and he had all the technology of time and it was on tape and then it was gone. It was erased. And I was very disappointed. But I only later realized that I would be able to recover all that and the videos I put out on time travel. So that was there. But I was dreaming of having lost all the tapes to it. Not that I ever had the tapes, but it was a dream of the future that I would actually have those, you know, figure out his basic information.
So precognitive. So you want to hear something crazy? Do you remember when, before we started, and I said I had a question, I said, no, I'll wait to ask it? It was about David Anderson.
Synchronicity.
Jesus.
Well, and I was, you know, it's interesting because I was just listening to Peter speak about that. I can't recall which one. Today on one of the shows you'd been on, I think maybe last year. So I was fascinated by that and how it came around that the information did eventually need to come out. And so it did.
Indeed. Indeed. And there, see, dreams are a stress point, or they reveal stress points. And they can, yeah, I mean, they're timeless. They're timeless. And I was just reading something, I think it was in one of my own books, but it was about, it might not have been, but it was about time. And time is like, you know, I think it was in one of Radu's books. Time, there's logic, and then there's time. Time is by, well, coincidence, you could call it, timing. Timing is a whole another factor of life, just how things fit together. Like timing is like say, I was talking to a friend yesterday in the morning about all the drudgery I was going to have to do yesterday, just drudge work, you know, administrative stuff, nothing fun. And I come down to the computer and I had the 6th book by Radu Sinamar had been delivered to me by my publisher in Romania. Wow. Changed the whole day. It was not a drudge day. It was not a drudge day, you know, and I said, wow, this is like, you know, let's start working on it. And so timing is an incredible thing.
Do you think there's some providence involved in that kind of lining up of events that you just explained, or how does that work?
Yes, and providence is a you know, I think not maybe the best word, but it's a higher dimension, which is sometimes called providence. In my Psychology of Space-Time video series, I call it the 10th dimension, which is based upon a mathematical model. And it's just like, you know, that's the totality of all. Everything is connected. But when you start making the connections, that's just the expression of the divinity, which is connected to everything anyway. So what you're getting is a recognition of the connection. Just like when you know, see somebody on the train or somewhere that you see before, it's like, wow. Like I went into the grocery store a week or two ago, and I'm sitting right over this lady, and I said, you look familiar. I couldn't tell who on earth she was. I said, but you look familiar. She says, yeah, you look familiar too. Then I recognized who she was. She had on glasses, and she didn't look like she does when she's all dressed up. She hosts a metaphysical group that I've spoken at a few times. So, you know, I mean, but I recognized her even though she didn't look like who she normally looks. So, you know, you see things in your dreams, but they're not necessarily located to your limited to your immediate environment. They can be far in the future because we're all connected.
Do you think that
and time's an illusion?
Right. Well, and then I love the whole thing is time equals distance, right? That whole aspect is that is one of the things I've really taken away from your work. Time equals distance. And how that's kind of affected my idea of what I call checkpoints in time.
Well,
But
yes, that work that comes from a book called Space-Time Physics by John Archibald Wheeler, famous physicist who was one of David Anderson's colleagues, and it was like sort of an overlooked piece of physics that was never really understood. And David told me when he put it in my face and tutored me on that in 2009. He said there's only about 4 physicists in the world who understand this, really understand it. Last time I talked to him, he said there are several more that understand it now. But at that time, 2009, he said there were only 4 physicists who understood it, that this concept that time is distant, because the dictionary won't tell you that.
it is so integral in the way I view and construct the reality around the apparent reality around myself, that I don't know. I'm glad to have encountered it in the way I have through you, though. So in the dream content, do you think it's possible? Is it possible that manipulation can happen through dreaming? So I want to reach in here and put your Philadelphia Montauk perspective on the dream state and what goes on when we're dreaming.
Well, the dream state is stimulation of your visual cortex, what it is.
Yes.
And the visual cortex is fed by perception. And it's a filter, but you can say, and it's been said that not my idea, but the dream is trying to reconcile and express that which hasn't been figured out or reconciled in the mind. Like, say, if you have a problem, like you don't know how you're going to do this, or you're fighting some problem, it'll make you sweat. You can't sleep because you're so upset about it. Well, that's a very big problem. Like the fact that your house is going to be foreclosed tomorrow or something like that. So, but there are lesser problems than that. And the mind tries to figure them out. And sometimes this comes out in a dream state. So, with me, because I've been knocking on the door of this time research, that's why the David Anderson dreams are so charged and exciting, because it's like, wow, I'm having a communication. And, he's not always been the easiest person to get information out of, because he has all these sort of built-in security blocks, or it's as if he has built-in security blocks. So the last time I spoke to him, I asked him questions for about an hour, and then I had the audience ask questions. But it was, I had to be very, I guess what you'd say, you have to be careful that if you let him talk too long, he'll talk for 5 or 10 minutes and not really say too much. So it's hard to get things out of him that are of really value, because he can talk for 5 minutes and not really tell you much, because that's his nature. It's almost like he has a built-in security issue. And then the people were asking questions that I thought were extremely inappropriate. And it was not, they were asking him questions that were metaphysical and not in his field. And, it really wasn't his forte. And, it wasn't necessary. So they didn't even know how to treat him. So anyway, so I hope I answered your question.
With your interactions and dream with David, how does that play out? What does that give us a feel for it?
As I said, years ago, I had dreamt of him um, you know, having these tapes erased and wanting to get the tapes and being frustrated about it, and uh, you know, actually coming out into my living room and having this lion grab me by the hand with his mouth and drag me over to the TV set. And there was a glass of water on the TV set, and not a glass of water, a bowl of water, which was from a Qigong exercise when, you know, you're taught to, you know, look at have a bowl of water, and then every so often look at the water and go move, you know, to move the vibration in the water. And then the lion, and then the TV is off. But it was like this was the lion dragging me to the television, which eventually I would make videos of David's work. And the lion is like the you know, it's like the head of the zodiac. It's the highest frequency.
Yes.
In one respect. So anyway, that was one dream. But the other night, it was a few weeks ago, I had an astounding dream where he was pointing at a watch on my wrist. I don't wear a watch in real life. So it's like that means watch. But he's pointing with his right finger, which in Qigong, we're taught that you emit Qi and you practice to emit Qi out of your right index fingernail area. You're emitting Qi out of there. So he's pointing with that finger, and he's pointing to the minute hand, which is on 46. I just wrote my newsletter, and that was, I mentioned that dream. As soon as I finished the newsletter and sent it out, I then realized what the 46 meant. The 46 refers to the fact that there's 46 chromosomes in human DNA. So there's a whole other theme of what's called the 24th gene pair. And as something I even wrote a script for, and we acted out in Romania on that theme of the 24th gene pair, which I posited that when you have the 24th gene pair unjammed, so you have when you have the gene pair unjammed, so you have 24 gene pairs instead of 23, you have a much more fluid capability to have paranormal abilities, which might include shape-shifting or time traveling or whatever. And I actually wrote that. He read that and you know, endorsed that we do a movie on it.
I've heard that from, I don't remember where I heard someone else talking about that. It was like that 24th pair was folded over incorrectly or atrophied. I can't remember the term they used, but it hadn't fully formed into part of the spiral.
Well, what it is it's not an unknown theory.
Okay.
I certainly didn't come up with it, but it's the whole idea is that two chromosomes are jammed together. I had a friend who was an expert in what do you call it? Biology, not just biology.
Genetics.
It was some type of biology, but you know, he was expert, and he talked about that. He says, "Oh yeah, we should have, you know, weekly or monthly discussions on this subject. It's so important." He saw the important from a biological perspective of this. Now, a disease in the body is when you have chromosomes mixed up, or hormones astray. But so this is like a master disease. It can be viewed as a master disease of the human body. It's like the body's walking around in a disease state. You could hypothesize that this is why human beings don't use all of their brain, because they have a jammed chromosome. I have one friend who told Judy Cole, and she said she was very interested in this topic, and she says, you know, you've got to find out from Preston how to unjam a frequency will unjam these two gene pairs. So I called and I asked him. He says, I know what you're talking about. He says that's very problematic because it's so complicated. These things are so scrambled up. So he said it was a very complicated issue.
Do you think
he knew exactly what she was talking about?
Do you think this scrambling was done intentionally, or just something we've grown into, evolved into, whatever?
I don't know. I think the new book that Radu just delivered, it's called Forgotten Genesis, might have some elucidation on that point, but I don't know because I haven't read it. It's not. I don't even think it's published in Romanian. I only have it in Romanian, so I have to, read it piece by piece, and I should have an answer in 6 months.
Do you think other signators like heterochromia in the eyes and Rh negative play into this 24th gene pair anomalous stuff that can act, that acts to me, looking at it, as an activating factor
It
in
would seem
this?
to be. They would seem to be related only because those aspects represent paranormal functions, and maybe if you had the 24th gene pair active, maybe these expressions would be more fluid. You can even posit that this is related to something called the Christ consciousness, where you have a fully activated human being that is fully active and fluid between the dimensions. If you go back into early Christianity, it's not all this stuff we see in religious movies. Sometimes you'll see bits of it in a religious movie where they'll show the Vesica Pisces. And the Vesica Pisces was like the watchword of the day. That was the signal of the age of Pisces, but it represents, and probably best expressed by Phil Dick, it's like a world of love. It's like a dimension of love, and where you're not in this dimension. So in other words, people were escaping to another dimension and connecting to another dimension. Escape might not be the best word. So it would create, and so it gets transmuted into a ridiculous situation where this world is bad because so you don't want to have pleasure in this world because it'll take your attention off the other world. And so pleasure and bathing and things like that become evil. And then you have martyrdom kicking in and people suffering for no good reason. And so it gets denigrated into the suffering on the cross, and it becomes a sadomasochistic religion based on sadomasochism and cannibalism, rather than something that is more
wholesome,
elevated, wholesome. Exactly. So, that's what we're dealing with here.
I really think they're on their last legs, though. I can't see the Catholic Church. I can't see the Vatican existing as it is for another 20 years. But that's me. I said that 20 years ago, too.
They have a saying or sort of a underground truth in Rome, and that someday the bones of Peter will be dragged through the street.
Mm.
They're not really his bones.
Yeah, but symbolically, this.
He's. I think. They don't even have any. I don't think historical evidence. Much of what they do have of Peter is false.
Yeah.
Well, that. So we have a lot of stories. Peter, by the way, the name Peter comes from
Peter.
It means interpreter. Yeah. Interpreter. That Peter was meant interpreter. His real name was Simon. So in esoteric tradition, according to Blavatsky, PTR meant Peter. Every oracle had an interpreter. And he was surrounded by 12 disciples, and only one of them was allowed to see the oracle. That was an ancient tradition that she talked about in Isis Unveiled.
Oh, yes. Yes. It's been so long since I read that. I mean, a long time. So, all right, back to the dream, the architecture of the dreamscape as you experience it now, and how you navigate through it. And I'm specifically at this point looking for maybe your perceptions on, and this is why I brought up the time equals distance paradigm or equation is within the dreamscape. Is there a sense of timing? Do you experience a sense of timing?
Well, I experience what I experience. I mean, sometimes the timing feels impeccable. What I felt with David Anderson lately is he's been in the dream state, he's been irritated and impatient to get together with me, which it should be the other way around. You know, not that I'm impatient, but you know, I'm very accessible to him. He's not
What?
very to me.
Why do you think he's impatient right now?
Well, that's just what the dream is saying. He might not be impatient at all. But well, it's probably because the time it's almost like the dream is forcing itself to come out. In other words, I'm I'm very, I guess what you call even keeled about it. But it's saying that even though I'm even keeled about it, that there's something that wants to make more happen on this subject.
So have you talked to him about dreaming about him?
Yes. Very interesting. This goes back to 2010. And what had happened was the last time I saw him in person. In 2010, he had written to me an email and he says, I would like to have a face-to-face meeting with you. You think we could do it this weekend, upcoming weekend? And I said, well, yes, but there's only one problem. We're having an event out at Montauk that week. He said, if I'm going to be out there that week. If you want to come out there, it's fine. And he wrote back and said, is it okay if I make a presentation there? I said, certainly. And that's where he actually showed us an early prototype of his time reactor on video. And there was about 20 people there, but I said, yeah, please do. So after he did the presentation on a Saturday, he came out on a Friday. He spent the day with everybody on Saturday. And then on Sunday morning, I took him out to breakfast. And I said, David, because we didn't have a chance to talk personally until that morning. And I said, you said you wanted to have a face-to-face meeting with me. What was it about? What did you want to have a face-to-face meeting? He says, I wanted to know what you wanted to do at Atlanticron in Romania this year. And I said, oh, that's kind of seemed kind of ridiculous, like, what do I want to do? Oh, why don't we do a film? Because last year we were doing a film and somebody wanted to take the cape and they ruined the whole project for the kids. Somebody got selfish about their cape, some adult. I said, he's acting very childish. And I said, so we couldn't do this film. But this time I'll do a script ahead of time. We'll have a script and we'll have everything we need. And he says, okay, I'll get some software, blah, 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 blah. And that was the meeting. But I said I had a dream before he wrote to me. And the dream was, I was in a hotel and I looked down from a mezzanine downstairs and I saw this guy and I said that I was looking for David Anderson, and the guy identified himself and said, he said, oh, he's not here yet. He'll be here soon. And I told Dave, and then later I had a meeting with David in that dream, and I told him about this guy, and he said, yeah, we have a guy by that same name who works in the Time Research Center. So I was picking up on an actual employee of his in the dream.
That's remarkable.
Well, how is that different from like remote viewing?
Well, it depends. I mean, remote viewing is traditionally not a dream. It's when
that was in a dream. I'm sorry.
That was in a dream, and it's the visual cortex working and connecting me to people in his research center or at least one person in his research center.
People around him.
Yeah, and it's like, who the people are who have participated in his time reactor experiments, I have no idea who they are. But the last time I talked to him was a year and a half ago during an event, and I said, David, one of the questions I have, you said that, last time we spoke, you said that I'd be able to see your, see one of these research labs. And all he said was, he says that the time is, it's getting very close to when that'll happen. Of course, it's been a year and a half.
Yeah, but he can jump ahead in time, so.
We don't know what he can and can't do.
True.
We really don't. And from what I've been able to gather, he has a normal physiological aging process that he's undergoing, just like the rest of us.
That's cool. I couldn't help but think about, when you're talking about the dreams and stuff around David, about the movie Arrival, which seems to be coming up lately. But did you see that movie?
Arrival?
Yeah, with Amy Adams. You should watch it. You'd like it.
Never heard of it.
It was like Best Picture a few years ago, I think, or close to Best Picture. Anyway,
I'm so tuned out of what's popular. Not completely. I did see Game of Thrones. I saw it all in about a period of a month, but
I haven't seen that.
But I tend to be tuned out to what people are watching.
So, well, in this movie, aliens make first contact with Earth, and they teach this one person their language, or she learns their language through interacting with them. And in learning the language, she gains, I don't know how to explain it, other than her awareness of her point in time changes it grows. So she can see things in her future, remember, if you will, things in her future and things in her past, equally. So, and my thought was, maybe being close to David has somehow entangled your energies, so your awareness has expanded into his purview, to what he experiences.
There is some sort of connection, but one thing I was talking about with a friend of mine who knows him, and it's like I said, because his website is now off the web, he'd be like, if I wasn't like stirring him up, he wouldn't be as much of a icon as he is. I mean, he can do a lot of stuff on his own and there's interviews with him that have nothing to do with me, but it's like I'm stirring him up. And it's sort of like, and then I delivered an explanation of his technology in a very clear form, which nobody else is going to do. It's like, it's a little, it's just kind of, because I understand certain aspects of it, people come to me as an expert on time, but I'm really not. He's the expert, but I have a precise understanding of it. It's a little bit like somebody who's a boxing trainer who doesn't box, but he knows, he can tell you who can beat who and why they can beat who and how to train a boxer, sort of. I mean, it's a little bit like that, because I don't travel in time, but I know certain aspects of it.
Do you give any credence to other reported time travelers like Bishago, or I can't think of another one?
Teeter.
Well, that's not real. I mean,
But I mean, it's still a name out there.
True. I was thinking more like Andrew Bishago. I was thinking more government-run time travel programs.
The problem with, and I'm not even going to address those two. The problem with people that come out with their stories, they're just like a dangling participle. They go nowhere. They go nowhere.
Right.
It's like,
the slice of time that has no context.
I was Nefertiti in a past life. Okay, good. Good for you. It's like, and I mean, they could all be telling the truth, but it's sort of like, it's attention grabbing. And I saw some video on time travel on YouTube, and it was like this guy talking. He was talking so much and so fast, he didn't have any clue what he was saying. You couldn't possibly follow him. He was talking about wormhole here, wormhole there, blah, 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 blah. He started quoting, the Frank Tipler stuff, but he didn't have he wasn't addressing any form of understanding, just shouting out a bunch of neato kino concepts. And this is unfortunately, I listened to an MIT professor on YouTube talking about time travel, and all he was doing was talking about movies. And he demonstrated no academic, conveyance of information academically. It was all just a bunch of theorizing based upon movies. This is not what a professor is supposed to be. In other words, he's feeding off of popular meme. This is not academic. And it was kind of embarrassing if you were, but people don't even know it's embarrassing.
Yeah, it's become ironic.
it's just, yeah. So, and then you have, and there's going to be a documentary that I'll be participating in, and the producer asked me, he says, "Is it okay if we have a physicist comment on this?" And I said, "Well, the problem you're going to have there is, first you have to qualify the physicist, because most of them won't even understand it, and they'll go off and pontificate on, something." Radu Cinemar's recent book, Inside the Earth, which was just published, goes into a whole discussion of black holes, which physicists have never come up with. It's interesting, very interesting. So, it's sort of like you're dealing with, I wouldn't call it frustrating. All you can do is educate people. You're dealing with people that are experts that, although they might be experts, they have a very limited knowledge, and they're not as expert as they think they are.
Yes.
But they're hailed as experts.
Yes.
And this is a big problem.
I think so too. Back in your dream world, if you don't mind, is it possible for you, and I'm just asking this of you and your experience with all this, coming to 66 years of dreams, and then how the content in which your life spills into that realm, do you think that the dream frequency, the dream landscape is possibly can act as a portal? So what do you think's going on there, and is it possible that it could be a portal?
It's definitely, it depends how you define or how you mean portal, but of course a dream is a expression of consciousness. So what you have in the case of like a portal, the way I interpret this, or the way I approach it, is you're talking about an exaltation of consciousness in the dream state. And that becomes synonymous with like an out-of-body experience where you connect with yourself outside the realm of the physical body, outside the realm of the physical universe. That is a different context. Can the dream take you there? Yes, it can. Could the dream take you to a parallel universe? That is like a parallel universe. It could. It takes your consciousness there.
Yes.
There's no limits, period. The dream state can either mimic that or be a gateway to that. In Qigong, we're taught to pay attention to our dream. One of the things we're taught to do is pick out 30 details in the environment every day. Like look at that detail as you're walking around. And then that will make you, encourage you to be aware when you wake up in your dream. and you wake up in your dream, and what are you taught to do when you wake up in your dream? You're taught to do Qigong while in the dream state, so as to maintain the dream state, and then walk around and be pretty or whatever you're supposed to do. You can explore the dream world. That's one approach.
So with that, with all that, and especially this is why I love the Qigong stuff, and that you are adept in that as well. Is there a possibility of unlocking a greater code, say the immortality code? So you wake up within the dream. The dreamer loves the dreamer feeds the dream, all that stuff. Is there?
Well, let me say this, and certainly it's possible. But if we take the book Transylvania Sunrise, where it talks about a chamber beneath the Romanian Sphinx, where there is ostensibly a device that can read out your DNA, and it can read out the DNA of virtually any species on any planet, and hybridizations of that DNA. Because this is a device, and because at the time that book was written, they'd only explored it for 6 weeks, it's like if they have that capability of microscopically analyzing your DNA, and they can look into the history of the world, it is obviously that someone, whether it's the protagonists that are in the books that I publish or not, certainly they would be the most obvious ones to do it, can look at this whole issue of the gene pair that I'm talking about. I don't know if it's even mentioned in the new book, but because I haven't got there yet. And, maybe I could do a find, hit the find command and look for, gene pair and chromosomes in the Romanian tongue and cheat and go ahead and start, translating stuff ahead of time. But, and see if he does comment on it. It's certainly something I would encourage him to do if I had the opportunity to encourage him. So this is like a dream world. How he talks about, he even describes it as something of a dream world, although it's not a dream world. It's very much akin to it because it's in a different state of mind. So is it if it's accessible there, it's accessible in the dream. In fact, there is a mention in Transylvania Moonrise about a friend of mine who did have a dream of being with David Anderson and myself in this chamber, and it fit the description of the chamber beneath the Romanian Sphinx, although the book wasn't even out. She didn't know about it. So she was picking up in a dream state on David and I being in that chamber, and it was all about the 24th gene pair. That'll probably be in my next newsletter because I still have to put it together. That's what the last newsletter led me to, this whole chromosome issue. And where does it stand? What does it mean? It suggests the evolution of human beings. But when I see human beings in their day-to-day existence, they don't look like they're too ready to evolve in that direction. They just don't. Because people are occupied with just other things. The people and the small amount of people who are genuinely interested in it, it's almost like they're not quite ready for that. And that the real, you think that the real smart people in the world, some of the people that are changing society through cyberspace, these people, some of them are very intelligent. Most of them are very intelligent. And so they have a whole new criterion of how they view the world. In astrology, it's very Uranian. So, how would they deal with some of these problems? Some of these people are unfortunately not as high-minded as we would like, but they could perhaps tackle the problem. Technology is can bring great solutions for mankind. It can also bring negative things.
So with this, is it possible? And so, and you know, when I'm asking these questions, I'm asking you, and what your opinion is. So just so you know, uh, the idea of timelines. So we talk a little bit about dimensions, and obviously, the dream state from this state is a shift in modality. It's a shift in dimensions. Is there a way? Do you see this whole timeline conversation that seems to be going on more increasingly of late as playing over in dreams? Is it able to affect the here and now if we shift a timeline within a dream?
Wait, can we get an opinion on what you consider a timeline first? Versus a dimension versus parallel reality, whatever.
Peter's life is his life is one timeline that you can map out from, you know, having that first experience, you know, when you're young to where you were today. That could be one timeline that apparently seems coherent, at least. So within a dream where we are allowing ourselves a certain suspension of reality or disbelief, where we can pop around and it's easier to move from this scene to that scene, from this timeline to that timeline. Are we able to affect the current reality of this waking dream that we're in through the dimensional shift of what we consider dreaming?
Well, what by the rhetoric you were using, you presented a very interesting question, and that's that like, if you want to define a timeline, the end is the beginning. It's a loop.
Yes.
It's all a loop. So therefore, that loop is a relatively infinite loop, and it has a certain consistency in it. But this presents a very big existential issue, because it's okay. So if it's a timeline and we die, what is the memory of that timeline? That timeline can only be a memory of the collective consciousness, which includes those who've come before us and those who will come after us. So it's like this continuation of existence that is independent of our active participation as a human being.
Yeah, it's like it's a rolling window of time that's a loop. I can see that. Yeah,
and it's like, and somehow it all comes back to the same place. Now that's hard for it's called a closed timeline curve. It's very hard for the mind to wrestle with that perception of it.
I get it. I totally get it.
However,
yes, you do.
There is also when you get into what's called the fifth dimension, that's the potential of everything. And this is akin to the phenomenon known as white noise. And white noise, it has different definitions. But in its most abstract and pure definition, it's the sum total of everything. And it's a transmission. This is why, when you get white noise on the TV, that is an indication. It's an indication, whether that's exactly the white noise we're talking about. Preston talked about it being reference to zero time. But white noise is all the potentials. So like, say, what you do with a TV or radio, you're filtering that noise. And it's noise because it's not filtered. And when you filter the white noise, you have a transmission. That is channel 7 or channel 6 or, WABC or whatever you're listening to.
The signal.
Yeah, and signal processing, by the way, is where so much weird stuff goes on in the Army. Into signal processing is you often find their tied to MK Ultra type stuff.
Yeah,
But,
I think the craziest tech that the military tech is probably analog.
well, the white noise theme represents all the potential different realities that there are. And in Hinduism, they had the god Brahma, who with every breath would create a new universe. That's a theological way of saying the same thing about white noise. You've all these universes, all these different timelines, if you want to call them that. And then can the timelines interact with each other? Certainly. They could infinitely react with one another. And then you have the big, you could call it the big man or big woman upstairs. That's the Godhead. But the Godhead isn't like the man with the white beard. It's consciousness. It's like from that perspective, God is trying to find itself through all of its creatures and self-recognition. It's just like it's not unlike a baseball team that will go out and win some games and lose some games and take a player off the team if they're not performing well. That's kind of how a Godhead would look at life. Got some good players, he's got some bad players, and it's like he's trying to find himself, but only for the purpose of recognition. He's just like he's experiencing him or herself. It's kind of, and then we're just, and because you're interested in astrology, when you talk about astrology from an astrological perspective, we evolve originally from the outer planets, from outer space into the sun. But when you get from the Earth, you're kind of born through Venus, and then you go to Mercury. Mercury is the mind. Mercury rules the mind, Gemini. So you have a mind. And once you have a mind, then you go into the sun, which is your ego. And then, the ego is a result of having a mind. So it's kind of like we think we're real smart evolving this human mind. But the human mind is almost like at the lower ebb of evolution from this standpoint. And then once you have an ego, then you have to go back through your mind, back up to the outer planets to where you, evolve back outwards. So the mind, we think is this tremendously wonderful development, but it's kind of the mind is a very divorced entity. It's a very divorced entity. And it's remarkable on the one hand. On the other hand, it's an individuated piece of consciousness that is very much divorced from the whole. So, you have these ideas of remote viewing. Well, remote viewing is this whole idea that you can go out and experience the, sort of divine powers. And nobody can really do it. So, with any realistic consistency. So,
or without technological intervention.
Well, it just, but it just kind of doesn't. Yeah, so it's like,
it's different. I get it.
The whole perspective of the mind is, not the limited, but it's somewhat overrated the way we look at it.
Yeah.
When you look at the divine schematic. So we're all sitting here on these multiple timelines, and consciousness is just, becoming aware of itself. And that's kind of the game. It's like, how much can we find out? It's like, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, it totally explains the repetition in the global quote unquote narrative that I see, and I'm sure other people see it too, that the same stories just play out over and over again with different characters.
Well, yes. And of course, when we move into these subjects, it gets a little more existential and a little more interesting. But in the end, you're kind of, you're right, because you can just say, well, what did they know in Atlantis? They knew everything, and they misfired, or some other civilization we don't even talk about or recognize.
It's the reptilians. Come on, they're the ones who crashed Atlantis.
Heard that.
Oh yeah, that's the going story. The Draco, the Syrian bees. So Sirius B, Draco reptilians, like did something to Atlantis, gave them some kind of AI, which blew up their shit.
Well,
but that's just a story, you know.
A lot of simplistic explanations.
Yeah, for this thing we have zero evidence for.
Yeah, I don't pay too much attention to that stuff.
Well, in light of all that as well, what do you think is so, especially coming from Qigong background, what's the nature of this reality that we're in, which is very also dreamlike, you know, because of the momentary aspect of it.
Well, what I just wrote about this. It's the nature of this universe that we know is resistant to concepts of time travel. It's resistant, much in the way that you know, society has its, you know, what do you call them, taboos.
Mm-hmm.
Like you don't take off your clothes in public in a society, and if you do, you'll get shunned. Uh, you know, there's all sorts of things you don't do in polite society or even impolite society. You don't kill people, but you know, you just see this sort of resistance. You know, if you know, like somebody comes into a room and just says, "Hey, I killed somebody." I mean, you imagine the way people are going to react. Well, this universe is, and the people in it are very resistant to time travel. They really are, because
Yes.
we're not built for it as we exist. And I equate this to what I call the 666 frequency. The 666 frequency is indicative of Baphomet, the energy of the earth, the energy of the physical plane. It's like a retarded zone because everything is dense and stuck. So this is where this idea of the 24th gene pair, unsticking the person from his body, his physical body, to where he becomes more liquid. In Qigong, we have the liquid body. You got the physical body and you've got the liquid body. You have the vapor body, the energetic body. But the whole thing is if you can become more liquid, you're more, you know, you can do more things.
Be like water, right?
Pardon me?
Be like water.
Exactly. So when you have this sort of situation with the, you know, the world the way it is, it's really something that one has to recognize and evolve out of. Whether the whole universe can be sort of like rebooted, that's something else indeed. I mean, there's also, you know, theology has thought about all of these things at one time or another. And there's this whole idea, and this is a Kuan Yin concept from ancient China, is like, you know, Kuan Yin will not rest until every soul is compassionately relieved from suffering in this plane. You know, that's a concept that,
Mm-hmm.
you know, nobody gets off until everybody's off. But that's just an idea. You know, one doesn't want to become a slave to, you know, rescuing every last piece of, you know.
It's not our job.
Oh, some people think it is.
Those people are misguided, probably by fake spirit guides.
It's a matter of choice.
Yeah.
And, you know, you know, the thing is, most of us in our current state aren't capable to even, it would be misguided to the point that we're not capable of carrying out such a thing.
how do you see the pillars of intent and fate within all this? Is there a sense of fate? We talked about providence earlier, but is there a sense like the closed square, or is there a sense that we are not driving but we think we are?
Well, I say when you're dealing with a subject of any kind, it could be esoterica, it could be magic, it could even be qigong, it could be the stock market. You have to have intelligence to deal with it, but intelligence is not good enough alone. You also have to have access. So if you want to, you know, if you have, like, say, what is his name? Aristotle Onassis made his fortune as he was a telephone operator in Buenos Aires, and he would hear all the trades going on. So he had access to the inside information, and it's only illegal to trade on inside information in the U.S. This was back, you know, a long time ago, and he traded. That's how he made his initial money, and then he invested in shipping companies and became the head shipper of the world. You know,
and Maria Callas.
He had access. Yeah, he had access and he had intelligence. Okay, and there's a third factor, fate, which is what you just brought up. Fate, which is also part of good luck. In mythology, Fortuna was the daughter of Jupiter. You know, Jupiter is good luck. And so, in other words, you can have access and intelligence, but you also need good luck. And as a subdivision of fate is really choice, choosing. Choosing is very much related to the word power. If you have power, you can choose, you can select. So this is these are all elements of life. You know, power, you can choose. So if, like, you choose, you might be given a crummy situation in life, but you can choose to make it better or choose to change it. If you say it has to stay the same, then you'll never change. And this is a big deal. But you've been handed the fortune, and with fortune goes choice. And if you have intelligence and access, it makes it all the better. So these are elements of life that should be recognized.
So with the visual cortex, as we were talking about it earlier, let's add in sound resonance that's making up how our processing units are perceiving this waking reality that we're having. How do you see resonance playing within all of this that we've been weaving together?
Well, the whole universe has been said to come from a single sound, a monochord, which again is you're dealing with a filtering. Sound is just one other perception. You know what we were talking about, visual cortex, where there's also a representative audio cortex function, where you're just filtering the electromagnetic spectrum, and the electromagnetic spectrum in its totality is going to be white noise. So you're filtering it with sound or with visualization. Obviously, you can have the two go hand in hand. And they kind of do go hand in hand.
And it's also, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Go ahead.
No.
I was going to say, not only filtering it physically, but you're filtering it mentally through your belief systems and your ego, and what information you take in is filtered through the way you view reality. So it's almost like a double processing there.
Exactly. Yeah, it's like, multiple processing, and this becomes intelligent. So, like artificial intelligence isn't really artificial, it's intelligent. It's
Yes.
It's just it's non-organic.
it's not. Well, see, the funny thing about it is that are we mimicking the process of intelligence in human bodies? Because humans are what create artificial intelligence. So it's like in magic, it's an extension, it's a familiar.
Yes.
It becomes like a familiar, and where this becomes very dangerous is in the concept of a golem.
Yes.
Golem, which is created by man but is not man, and to what degree? Like we have HAL the computer in 2001,
right,
which becomes like a golem that makes itself more important, at the expense of human life.
Artifice.
Exactly.
Is it possible then, with all this, and I like the idea that that we brought in artificial intelligence, even though it is it is intelligence nonetheless. What makes this, with all of the stimuli, and as we look at it through the filter of white noise, what makes this, why is this reality not considered a dream? What's giving us, what's holding it down, suggesting that these rules are actually tangible and real?
Well, I think that many traditions do consider it a dream, illusion, Maya. It's like, what is holding it? Well, a dream is in a different context than so-called ordinary life, because a dream is, it's all sort of pretend. This is a dream that is like a program on the holodeck of Star Trek, which you can't suspend it, you can't get out of it unless you are evolved to the point where you know how to do that, where you can step outside. That's a point of personal evolution.
Die.
Yeah,
that's a quick way out.
Well, yeah, and then when you die, there has to be a different perspective. There has to be a different perspective, because you can't, when you die, you can't maintain the artifice of the human body anymore. You are relieved. And, it's like you hear these things about people who have passed away, and they experience such great peace and relief. You hear these stories.
But that just might be what you want to hear.
Well, yeah. Well, it's.
I'm not poo-pooing ghosts, by the way.
No, I know. Certainly it's one alternative, because you see, the thing is, you can realize how futile some of the problems people have in life. They get so attached to them, and then you hear stories of the Greek gods being jealous of humans because their lives aren't forever. Their lives will end. The gods become jealous.
Mm-hmm.
Immortal is like a curse to them. Oh, it's all relative. It's all relative.
What are your, so let's ruminate on death for a minute. And, it always occurs to me, and I say this every show, is that it just is the same thing to me as the birthing process. Just, they seem like the same points. Like the line is now circled. And you mentioned it is shedding the artifice of the avatar, the flesh. And yet, in context to some of the great philosophical ponders, this is, no matter what, in some of them, this is a dream. And even the golem that we're filling, the clay mating, is part of it. So we're not the breath, our breath, the I is not really I. So what is, could you just go further into death and how you experience the I'm stumbling here.
Well, okay, when you're saying the breath is very important, because the breath is what defines life. Breath is in and out function. You breathe in
you exhale out. In Qigong, you're taught to breathe in and breathe out the same duration. You want it to be as long as possible. So so you have a balance of yin and a balance of yang. They balance together. So that is the action of life. So life, Qi is life, Qi is breath, and it is also equates to spirit. So it's the very action of in and out. And obviously you see that in the sexual process, which is an aggrandized form of creating life.
Mm-hmm.
But so it's like, you're moving in, you're moving out, you're going back and forth. This is life in itself. And of course, in a body, it's very well defined. If you're outside of the body, it's a different reference point, but you're still going to be moving in and out if you're participating in the stream of consciousness. So much of it depends upon the perspective that one takes.
And I guess we didn't get to this earlier. I think you said way earlier, that if I recall right, and I didn't make a note on this, that you haven't had an out-of-body experience.
I've had an out-of-body experience.
What could you walk us through what that was like for you, and possible any details about it, and then your idea of what it is?
Well, I can only say that I think I identified with an out-of-body experience when I read that Ray Bradbury story, the Kaleidoscope, because it kind of told me that I was immortal. But that wasn't necessarily a spiritual experience. Well, it was in a sense, but it wasn't like I had any visual sensation. Well, it's kind of like I did, but it was just an excitement. I did have a dream when I was in high school of going out of my body. And it was a very odd dream because I dreamt, and see, I was not Christian at all. I was, very much, and I was not trained in Christianity. I'd only, heard what people talk about. And I had a dream of being in some civilization that was kind of Baroque. It was strange, but we were all looking for Jesus, and he was a point of safety. And I found this very kind of like odd because I wouldn't have identified with that at all in my waking life. And there was this character called the Beast. Now, I didn't know what the Beast was because I didn't know the Beast 666. I had no idea. You might have heard about it. So everybody was afraid of the Beast, and I was one of these people. And we're trying to find Jesus. And finally, I found him in a crowd. And I touched his robe, which was obviously inspired by the fact that I saw the movie The Robe. I touched his robe, and then I went out of my body. I went straight up to the moon, off the earth and to the moon. And I looked over the moon, and the moon was like a newspaper clipping. And this was actually sort of a prognostic dream of Peter Moon, that I was going to become Peter Moon with the moon.
Oh, wow.
And it was called, in the dream, it said, this is Isaac Asimov's moon. And of course, Isaac Asimov died just as before I wrote the Montauk Project. He would have had hyper reactions to that book. But he was sort of like the, myopic scientist. But yeah, so that was an experience I had in a dream state. But I got involved in Scientology in 1971, and at which point, when I was studying the Dianetics course, he's talking about past lives and exteriorization, which he called out-of-body exteriorization. I had no inkling of either one of these. not really. Although I'd had an experience that I could identify with that, I said, wow, this stuff is really far out. But as I began to do the techniques, I had an experience with this, which was relieved me of, physical problems that I had in my throat. Great relief, tremendous relief. Wow. If that's the only thing I'd ever experienced with Dianetics, I would have been happy as shit, That's it, great. And then a year after that, and I had I could reference myself outside of my body. And then a year later than that, I had a full-blown out of the body experience where I lifted up over the location I was in. It was during an event, a Scientology event, and I looked down and I could see my friend and me sitting down below. And I said, wow. And that was kind of, I suppose it's a St. Paul moment of St. Paul falling off his horse and becoming a Christian. I was already a Scientologist at that point in my life, but that kind of like made it all become, crystal clear what the reference point was. And you just kind of know it. It's not like a delusion. It's not like an illusion for me. But I've read or heard of people that were in Scientology for 30 or 40 years and never had any such thing happen. They're just, going along at some sort of snail's pace and end up in a very abused life situation. That's if that answers your question.
Beautifully so. And I want to know, with that experience, did you get a sense of immortality? So
well, yeah, you have a sense of that you're immortal. I did have a revisit of it in 1980s when I was having my blood drawn at a chiropractic clinic. They were drawing my blood, and I'm watching it. I don't remember the last time I'd had my blood drawn, and I'm happily watching it. I'm not afraid that they're sticking a needle in my arm. But the next thing I know, I'm out. All I know is that I'm in a total happy situation. I'm outside of my body. Feel like I'm in, not heaven per se, but something akin to Nirvana. And I said, oh no, my wife is going to be crushed if I die. She's going to be absolutely devastated. I got to come back. So I came back for her. And then I made a decision to come back. And the next thing I see these, the doctors are like panicking. They're going, he's having a seizure. He's having a seizure. They're all panicking. And I go, who's having a seizure? I think to myself, I got to go help this person who's having a seizure. Then I open my eyes and I see all these people like doing shit over me. And I think they're trying to put a tongue depressor in me. And I realize they're talking about me. I said, oh, this is not good. I go, and I couldn't talk. I had no voice. So I started to motion them with my hands that I'm okay. And then my voice came back. I said, I'm okay. And basically, I didn't have a seizure. What had happened is they took my blood and I fainted.
Yeah.
And I wasn't afraid. I don't even remember fainting. I just fainted and I was out, and boy, was I in peace. And I came back for my wife. And that, so it's like, wow, I felt like, man, I know where I am. When I was out there, I said, man, I'm in familiar territory. This is not intimidating to me. It's a nice place to be. That was my experience.
It also speaks to the fact that there was a sense of your will there. You came back. And as we were talking about with fate and intent earlier, that somehow that ties into the fact that you did have a choice there.
Yeah, you always have a choice. Now that doesn't mean you have a choice every consecutive second. It's like if you're in a ball game and you're running from second to third base, it's not a good idea to just run off the game. You know what I mean? You're going to upset the tranquility of events. You wait till after the game to go off. You know what I'm saying? Or to quit. You don't quit while you're running between second and third. There's times to make your choices. There's opportunities. This is the god Kairos. Kairos, we hear of Chronos, but Kairos is also the god of the quality of time. And traditionally, he has a lock of hair on his head. And when he comes into your world, you grab that lock and you grab it. He's opportunity. You seize the moment. You seize the opportunity because he doesn't stay around long. And that's why he has one lock of hair. You catch him. So there are opportune times. And that's when you make your choice. I'm going to, invest in Facebook today, not then, not now. I mean, if you didn't invest in it back in the day, you missed the opportunity.
So with all that said, what do you think goes on with this idea of ghosts, hauntings, besides residual energy? And unless that's literally all you think it is there a sense that things are overlapping?
You'll find, of course they are, but what you'll find with ghosts, and you'll find this with entities that are channeled, so much of what these beings are trying to accomplish is to get your attention. Just to get your attention and put their thumbs in their ears and wave their fingers at you. It's no more complicated than that. They are starving for attention. I've seen, channelers, and I was just totally, it was very obvious. They take over, these spirits would take over a being, and you could just see the spirit was just enjoying the adulation. Now, obviously, the person doing the channeling was getting paid well for it, but the entity was getting much satisfaction of being admired and viewed.
Was it an angel?
No. Okay. It wasn't a devil either. It was just a being that was enjoying the attention it was getting from the audience, and the audience is like, wow, and it's like,
that's kind of a psychic vampirism.
I was just thinking like energetics.
Yeah. Energetic.
What it was entertainment. It was actually entertainment.
But that's
I mean, I don't think it was that serious as vampirism in this case. It was just entertainment,
It's not necessarily a bad thing. I'm just saying.
Yeah, not necessarily a good thing either, but it's
correct.
The problem is the adulation, and of course what is far more interesting to people is, not even necessarily talk about the things we're talking about, is if they can get prognostications of their own future. People are very interested in their own selves. So if you'll get better ratings for a show if you're doing readings for people and they're calling it and they get to ask their question. That's just the way people are.
I don't get that. I don't want to know anything about my future.
Well, what I'm saying is that creates a great demand.
Yeah. Oh, totally.
Well, but it's because they want to. I mean, well, maybe you don't want to know about your future, but some people, want to know about their next boyfriend. They want to know about, whether they can, get a better deal on their house or whether they can win the lottery. This is just how people are, and they're very hungry. They're very hungry for that sort of thing.
Hungry ghosts.
That's just what I was thinking, Jerry.
I know.
So Peter, what about and this is going to be my wrap-up question before we go to some questions that Jerry has from the chat, if there are any. What is the concept of the soul and the spirit? with all of this, what are they from where you stand, from your stand or slant?
Well, you know, the spirit is just an identity. It's an identity. That's all it can be. You know, an entity, an identifiable entity. A soul, I mean, you're getting into semantics, and you know, a soul is basically no, there's really no difference, although a soul implies that it's kind of like a residual body that, you know, where all the I guess underpinnings of the spirit reside. It's almost like a suitcase that you carry with you. But in its purest sense, a spirit is just a spirit, and the soul would actually be sort of the baggage of the spirit in that sense. The baggage could be full of, you know, cute little kittens and wonderful things, or it could be filled with all sorts of
How about memories, experiences, things that it could build an ego from, build a personality from?
or worse than that, it could be filled with crime, you know, unsort of, you know, it's like, you know, baggage. Um, you know, somebody said that somebody's a heavy soul, a good soul. Well, what is it that makes an entity good or bad? It's what he carries with him and what he puts out. You know, the spirit is just sort of an identity that he identifies. He identifies with good, bad, healing, or negativity. These are experiences, you know, so how we label them and identify them is less important than the fact that we have the experiences.
So say the you that experienced that in the last example you gave us of when you were out of body with the blood drawing,
Yeah.
was that experience that your bilocation there, was that possibly your soul? Was that, or was it
Well,
still?
that was me. That was me being awake and aware while I was out
Yes.
in just a space that was it was more than a mental space, you know,
Hmm.
but it was a mental space, but it felt much more like a mental space in that I was out in not referencing the physical universe, not but I wasn't completely disconnected either, because I wow, this is where you want to be.
Hmm.
And then see, well, I can't I remembered I had a connection to my wife and I didn't want to abandon her. So I that was out of consideration, you know. um I had a friend who said several out of body experiences, and when she had died, or almost, she was dead, clinically dead, and they brought her back, and I was the one who was like, you know, on the phone and orienting her. She said, where the hell am I? What's going on? And I would orient her to the room and where she was on the phone. And she said, you know, I would have been so happy if I had just passed. Everything would have been perfect. Everything would have been perfect. I could have just left everything behind. She would have been happy or passed away. Uh, you know, I mean, she got better and her life worked out, you know. So, but, you know, she was not afraid of that. Had a lot of experience with it. So people, I mean, there's a whole, you know, near death industry. And when I say
Yes.
industry, I don't
Yeah.
mean to malign it in the way of not economically oriented, but it's you know, that whole state of existence that wasn't so mapped out, you know, 50 years ago.
Yeah, yes, I agree. But there does seem to be also a lot of money with people out there with it too. As with anything, it's still, to me, all of it's still fair game, though. I don't think, science isn't. It's all still fair game for fair ponder, fair fodder.
Well, let me put it this way: the compassion in action, which was started by Daniel Brinkley, completely changed the attitudes of how people deal with death and hospice. In other words, there's much more compassion and understanding of the end stage than there was 50 years ago. And sometimes these people can be very non-adept and very, downright abusive because they don't understand the process.
Yeah.
So there has been progress in that area, but those who know can kind of navigate the area, and those who don't know can be befuddled by the experience.
Yes. Well said. All right. Well, that I think we've woven a beautiful cloth here. As far as I'm concerned, I know there must be questions. I would be shocked if there weren't.
I only got one, believe it or not.
It's shocking to me. I came into this with so many.
Everyone's going to come up with questions now. But the question was about deja vu, which you didn't ask Peter about. But as far as going back to the question that Nish had asked about jumping timelines or switching or whatever, Nate asked if do you think deja vu is possibly a window or a portal or an opportunity to shift into another timeline?
Well, I never thought about it as an opportunity to shift. It's certainly a recognition that it's a familiarization. Like, wow, I've been here before. This is familiar to me. This exact moment. Like, people have tried to describe it as sort of like a brain rewiring or something. Like, you just want to, what is it? I've been here before. It's an interesting experience. But I think, in my experience, the deja vu is sort of like, it's a recognition as opposed to an opportunity. If it was an opportunity, I think if I recognized it as an opportunity, it's a reminder. I mean, I can't say that it's not an opportunity, because if you kept having enough deja vus in one day, it might kind of clue you in on how to think. But usually I haven't had a deja vu in a long time. They're always few and far between.
Yeah.
Always very.
In one way, they're kind of one could look at them as timeline synchronicities, where two parallel realities, if you will, meet up. And maybe for that,
different types of deja vu too. The ones I've had were just like, oh, that I've been here.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, there's a whole list of deja experiences. So, also with the deja vu thing, the ones that you've had, Peter, personally, were you able to pinpoint them to, say, for me, I can always pinpoint them to a dream that can be decades back. So, so I've never had an anomalous deja vu that I couldn't pinpoint to a dream. Have you been able to pinpoint the origin of your deja vus?
Not so much. I mean, I've gone into dreamscapes where I would say, I said, this is familiar, but it's no place I've ever been to other than in a dream state, as far as I know, not in this reality. So you have certain areas of familiarity in dream states that are not tied to the earthbound reality that I know. You like, every time I go to Montauk, it's not so much deja vu, but it's like, oh God, it's like coming home, because I've been there so many times. It's almost like I've never lived there, but it's almost like someplace I've lived, like going back to an old neighborhood because I'm so familiar with it. And of course, there's other areas that I might be familiar with, but it's I just really never identified deja vu as anything other than an experience. I've never really traced it back or done anything that says, wow, I've been here before. But okay, you just get over it.
What about if you apply that to people? Are there, that you've had this? And I think we all have this, but where there's clearly some sort of history here, and yet you're just now, you're crossing paths for seemingly the first time.
Well, some people will be familiar,
Mm-hmm.
like one woman I once met, and I felt like I knew her, but I would know her in the future.
Mm-hmm.
And she kind of felt the same way, and I guess there was some sort of compatibility or affinity there for a short time in our lives. But and sometimes you can you can pick up on somebody's energy just because of the way they are, and you can be comfortable or familiar with
It's very, very true. We got another question here from Rain DeBlanc.
JJ, hey JJ.
Do you ever see repeating number patterns? Or do you have a lot of number synchronicities, things like that?
My wife sees 555 all the time. 555, even to the point where it's bugging her. I used to see 1111 all the time back in the 90s.
Mm-hmm.
I found out other people were seeing it. That was before I was even around other people. It was before I got involved with Montauk, and then everybody was seeing 1111.
When there was a harmonic convergence back then too.
And that was a few years after the harmonic convergence. So 1111 and 1111 is basically representative of DNA.
Hmm.
The 22 strands.
Yes.
Or that's not what it is, but it's a DNA number.
Right.
It's life. Go ahead.
No, I got one last one after this. That's it. It's what do you know about Montauk Chia? Montauk Chia?
Montauk Chia.
And the microcosmic orbit and drawing energy from the stars.
Mantak Chia, the name, I once went out of my way to meet him and do his workshop because I wanted to meet him because his name was Mantak. And Chia, he said, it means, Mantak, he said, means like bright light or virtue. And Chia, he said, meant beast. Not in a negative sense.
It gives a whole new meaning to chia pets, by the way.
Well, it's a different meaning. It's a homonym.
I know. I was kidding.
Yeah, but Mantak Chia, I had a doctor. She was a Chinese, Filipino actually, but she was Chinese extraction. She was a very gifted doctor, and she told me she worked on Mantak Chia, and he'll say in his videos that he doesn't get sick, and she says, oh, he was very sick. She said he was very. She said he took all of his work from his wife, and I studied a tradition of Qigong that is very different. The microcosmic orbit, where I've learned the microcosmic orbit is within the body. The macrocosmic orbit is going around the whole Earth. I don't know what he teaches. I don't endorse what he teaches. The tradition I've learned is very different than what he teaches. So I know that he's been very popular and whatnot, but that he was very nice when I met him and all that, and I was just curious about his name, and but what I've learned is different. So I'm not a student of his, sure. And in fact, yeah, this is a long lecture, but anyway, go ahead.
No, I just want to thank Nate for asking that question. Thanks for the answer. That's all I got, Nish.
This has been fantastic.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you.
It's so nice to talk to you. Thank you for coming on the show.
It was nice to have a conversation, and instead of me having to, give a diatribe, which is usually what I have to do.
Yeah, it's an unconventional podcast, to say the least. Right. But yeah, we like to keep it interesting and talk about things that other people don't really mention or talk about or go into detail about. So thank you, Peter. Thank you, Nish.
Thank you for having me.
What about Jerry, the plugging?
I was just going to ask him that. Do you have any new work or anything you'd like to plug or talk about? Or?
Well, sure. I have, I'll mention my website, the Time Travel Education Center, which has free videos that will let you understand in very simple language the mathematics of time travel, mathematics and physics. It's at an 8th grade level, and it's all you need. I also have a website, skybooks.usa.com, where you can look at the books and buy them. You can buy them there. You can buy them on Amazon. My books are on Kindle and the other ebook formats. So the latest book, I've released 2 books in January. One is Inside the Earth, The Second Tunnel, the 5th book in the Transylvania series by Radu Sinamar, which goes into the science of the inside the Earth, what's inside the Earth. It's not like people think. And with the adventures of Radu going into the inside the Earth, he also just, as I said earlier, released a new book to me in the Romanian language. It'll take me at least 6 months to translate it and publish it. Forgotten Genesis. And I also did a silver anniversary edition of the Montauk Project, which has the patent for the time reactor in it and an explanation of the time reactor, which is a time machine, of David Anderson. That's Montauk Project Silver Anniversary Edition, available on Amazon. And that's the latest. I'll be working on that new Radu Sinamar book.
Great. I'm looking forward to reading that. And I have put links to all those books and websites that he mentioned in the show notes and the description for anyone who's listening.
Thank you. Thank you both very much.
Yeah, thank you, Peter. And thank you, everyone, for being here tonight. And those who are listening in the future, we're thinking of you too. Next week, we have Greg Newkirk of Hellier fame. So that should be an interesting discussion.
Yes.
So thanks, everyone. We'll talk to you next week.
Thank you, everyone.